Mark Skaar on the Skaar Kaard on 103.7 The Fox, and I'm proud to welcome in Mr. Cowboy Mach Bell. How are you?
Wow. Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's finally wonderful to talk to you after all this time, and we talk on Facebook every now and again, but I wanted to bring you to the attention of our listeners because the Mach Bell Experience has a brand new track called Power Fever, and I want to get to that in a moment. But first, how are you feeling, my friend?
I'm feeling great today. I guess you might have heard I had a little rough health scare there. A couple months ago, I was driving to band rehearsal, and I had a heart attack while I was driving in my car all alone. And it was a lengthy, massive heart attack, although I didn't realize that's what it was until the next day in the hospital, and then the next day when I was getting open heart surgery and a quintuple bypass. But now, I just finished up my cardiac rehab at the hospital, 36 sessions of that, and now I feel ready to... I got the power fever. I'm ready to rock and roll and get back on the road.
Cowboy Mach Bell came to fame because of the Joe Perry project. Again, I'll get to that in a moment. I wanted to focus on Power Fever, a song which, my understanding, Mach, has been around for a long time.
Yeah, that's kind of the secret, because when you got new product, everything's new, brand new. It is brand new, but it's, I guess, what they call NOS, new old stock. This is an older tune that my lead guitarist, Johnny Press, wrote back in, 73, back when he and I were both getting our, start in big-time rock and roll here in the Bay State. And the song, they never put it on an album or anything, and it just been around, and a lot of us old rockers would always kid Johnny, when are you going to do something with Power Fever, man? We love that song. It was so catchy, you hear it and you never forget it. So I was thrilled to have the opportunity now that I'm finally playing in a band with Johnny Press to say, hey, let's do that, Power Fever. And, it seems as fresh as anything to me, and it really, the lyrics talk about my heart attack, even though they were written 50 years ago, which, there's a serendipity there that really turns me on. I like those karma, weird things that connect where there's a meaning behind it.
Or in this case, a double meaning.
Right. People were asking me if I was going to write about the heart attack. I write books. I'll write about it in a book, and I will write another song or more songs, I'm sure, that will allude to it. But I wasn't ready to do that yet. And then I hear this song that Johnny wrote 50 years ago that sums everything up perfectly. So, boom.
Talking to Cowboy Mach Bell about Power Fever. Tell me about the Mach Bell Experience and who's in it and what are your aspirations as you've gotten older, but you still have the itch that needs to be scratched?
Yeah, Johnny on lead guitar. I've got Al Alessandro, a karate instructor who actually runs the academy, on drums. Jeff Tremblay is my second guitarist. And Joe Black, who's a local rock star here in Boston. We call him Official Joe Black, on bass. In 2019, I'd been teaching music. Had been my main music thing for the last 20 years. At little private schools and stuff, I'd run music programs for kids. But then in 2019, word got out that I'd written a diary while I was with the Joe Perry project back in the 80s. I ended up publishing the diary at the end of 2019, which started leading to appearances and, things like this, coming on radio shows and doing autograph shows and things. And I started being on stage, doing panels and whatnot, being an MC, and I really missed the stage, and I missed all of that rockin' aspect. And so when Johnny Press came to me and said, hey, man, you're really getting out there again. You're always out promoting your books and talking about the rock. Well, why don't you just get back to rock and I'll put together a band. This was a fantastic situation. Johnny said, I'll put together a band. I'll find the guys. I'll hire them. I'll fire them. I'll teach them the Thunder Train songs and the Joe Perry Project songs, and we'll write some new songs. And I was like, hey, that's... and then you show up and do the gigs. I said, that sounds pretty good. Sign me up. So that's how the Mach Bell Experience got going. We just recorded the single just, 3 weeks ago. We recorded it, released it. We're back in rehearsal.
We're talking with Cowboy Mach Bell. And so we need to go back roughly 40 years. You are, Thunder Train is no more. You are actually traveling with a circus. And then you get I guess, for lack of a better term, there's a lot of cattle calling goes on, but you get a call to say, hey, Joe Perry's looking for a singer. What happens next?
It was more like Joe needs a singer, and we decided that you'd be perfect, and so learn these 6 songs and come down and audition for Joe. But it wasn't an audition like there was going to be 3 other guys there trying out or whatever. It really was, we got to move fast. Everything had suddenly just fallen apart for Joe. He had lost his deal with Columbia. He'd lost his band. The Joe Perry Project had been around for 3 years at that point. He'd already gone through 2 different singers. Mm-hmm. Now he lost his second singer and the bass player, so it was down to Joe and a drummer. They had dates booked. They had to get Joe out on the road, had to get him out of town. He was having some, besides like everybody, he needed to keep a roof over his head, but he also was having marital difficulties and some other legal problems from the old band, Aerosmith. The best place to put him was out on the road, away from everything. So they said, Mark, learn these songs and get in there and make it happen. And at first I turned it down. But then I took the gig, and I ended up with him. I was with him for almost 2.5 years. We did 236 shows together.
So then my next question is, how are you smart enough to document everything that went on in the project by having a diary? Obviously, you probably must have always kept one.
Yeah, I'm one of those weird diary people. I have them for all kinds of things. I have a journal for my garden. Like, I keep track of when I see the first birds in the spring and when things come up, when the peonies pop up or whatever. And then I've got my rock and roll journals. Maybe it started, my dad sailed. And when I was little, he'd say, you keep the ship's log, even if we're going out for just a day or 2. And I would keep a log of the adventures back when I was like 5 or 6, when I barely knew how to write. Then, like, writers and people who were making Aerosmith books sometimes would contact me because it went through the grapevine that I had this book. My timeline's right on.
Talking to Cowboy Mach Bell, and Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker was the record that came out of your liaison with Mr. Joe Perry. And, of course, you'd been out on the road testing those songs long before you recorded, and throughout this whole situation, trying to find a record deal.
That was a difficult time. When you're a concert act, if you're going to see the concert, if you're like me, you're blasting the record all the way to the concert, and you're sitting out in the parking lot, listening to it, and
yes,
because you're getting yourself psyched up to go in and then hear it live in front of you. People would do that with the Joe Perry Project, but they were listening to the guy who sang on the first album, or they'd be listening to the guys that sang on the second album. These weren't the guys that would be singing at the concert that night. Those guys were all gone. Now it was me, but there was no record for like over a year. So Danny and I, the new guys, were those 2 strangers up there. I haven't seen them anywhere. And we were introducing a lot of new material. So luckily Joe has the best fans in the world, so the fans stood by him. It's a great way to put together an album, to do it out on the road and put those songs together and test them in front of audiences, but hard for the singer to go out. Always like, who is that guy?
What was it like having to sing Steven Tyler and Ralph Mormon and Charlie Farron and then do you?
Yeah, that's no fun either. That's like you come on as the new quarterback for the Patriots, and people are saying, hey, do it like Tom Brady did it. And you're like, no, I do it like I do it. And I was having an identity crisis, switching around from, am I supposed to try to sound like Steven Tyler? That's going to be ridiculous. Or am I supposed to try to ape the song, like be a tribute band to the band that I'm actually in? I'm the actual real singer of this band, but I'm supposed to be trying to... Joe, to his credit, never told me, hey, you got to sing it more like Steven or sing it like Ralph or anything like that. He gave me full creative freedom to perform the songs my way. I tried to do the best I could for the fans because they wanted it to sound like the records, to be true to myself. And, I caused a lot of mental stress.
So then fast forward to when you got everybody's attention, these diaries exist, and then you go on a podcast, which you and I don't know if you were listening to it, but I've been listening to it for years. It's called The Rock and Roll Geek Show, and the guy that hosts it, his name's Michael Butler, and he encourages you, implores you, in fact, hey, Mach, you have to get these published. That's where then all of a sudden, voila, we got some traction and a book appears.
Yeah, he was absolutely the catalyst that made me finally do it, and I really enjoy Butler. I enjoy his show. It's a lot of fun, but he throws some difficult questions my way, some weird theories of his that he'll throw out at me and kind of twists my mind a little bit and makes me look at things in a new way. So it's a combination, like I'm on the psychiatrist's couch as well as trying to sell my latest whatever it is, a book or a record.
Now, of course, Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker, the first book is not only in print, but it's an audiobook, too.
I enjoyed doing the audiobook. I used my voice in my music, and it was fun to bring the book to life, and I invited Danny, my bass player from the Joe Perry Project, and Charlie Farron, the singer who preceded me. He's a good friend of mine now. I didn't really know him very well back in the day, but now we can get together and share war stories, and we do a bit of that on the audiobook as well. So it's the whole book as published plus extra content from having these guys from the band, and one of our popular DJs in town, Carter Allen, comes on as well.
Yeah, I highly recommend our listeners check out Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker. It's just fantastic. And the second book, I Gotta Rock.
Second book, and now I'm working on a third.
That's what I hear. What's going to be in that?
I want to move through surviving through rock and roll as you continue on. I mean, my first book was in my early 30s, and then my second book, I Gotta Rock, I went back. It's kind of a prequel. I start when I was a kid, talk about the rock. But all those stories end around when I was around 36. Well, I kept on rocking after that, and now I'm rocking again. And then with this, I was looking for, what's the climatic mountain or whatever. And then I had the heart attack, and I said, wow, this is kind of cool. I like to write about, and I have been writing a lot about the heart attack experience in a way that I think people that don't necessarily go read books about health and medicine might enjoy reading it from my point of view, and tips I have and things I learned from my experience in the whole coming down, realizing what was going on and then dealing with it, the ICU experience and the recovery experience. I mean, every turn of it was another horror story. But a lot of good silver linings came out of it, too. So those are things I'd love to write about.
One more question, and I better let you go. I read somewhere that you have a connection to Iowa's own Tommy Bolin.
I do. I write about him quite a bit in my second book, I Gotta Rock. Yeah, Tommy used to come over here to the Boston area to play the Boston Tea Party, which was kind of our, like Bill Graham's Fillmore East and Fillmore West. It was a place where you'd see, for $3, see Led Zeppelin, Jethro Tull, Traffic, Jeff Beck Group, Yardbirds. And all those bands would have Zephyr as their opening band. Tommy Bolin with some kids that he met, I think, out in Boulder, Colorado. Yep. And they were just like that opening band. It was always the opening band with Zephyr. I mean, they were just great, and they were always around. But when they weren't playing opening for Led Zeppelin, they would just be like at the Cambridge Common playing. And then when I hitchhiked across country when I was 16, I went to Boulder and went to a free concert on a mountaintop. And who was playing? Terry Reid and Zephyr with Tommy Bolin. So I'd run into Tommy a lot back then. And I ran into him I think it was the year that he passed away, when he was doing an FM broadcast from the studio where I was recording with Thunder Train, and it was a nice reunion to see him again.
He would have been in Deep Purple then.
That'd be the last time I'd see him.
Yeah, he was in Deep Purple at that time, or just out of it, maybe.
Yeah, I think maybe he's just out. He was doing one of those live broadcasts of a solo album he'd just cut when I saw him last.
Cowboy, if people want to find the books, how can they best do that?
OnceARocker.com. OnceARocker.com. That's where everything, my books, my music, you want to look at my 70s, my 80s, my 23, I got everything.
Thank you, Mach, for being with us. It's been a blast.
Thanks, man. I hope you enjoy Power Fever.
That's Cowboy Mach Bell. I'm Mark Skaar. This is the Skaar Kaard on 103.7 The Fox.